At first, today's question might seem a bit self-explanatory. Of course Darth Vader wasn't still Anakin Skywalker once he challenged Obi-Wan on Mustafar. The timeline of events is fairly clear. Anakin becomes Vader on Coruscant and then duels Obi-Wan afterwards, making it appear that Anakin's fall was complete, and it was then Vader who force-choked Padme and engaged Obi-Wan in lightsaber combat on Mustafar. However, there's a lot of Legends lore demonstrating that this linear progression isn't entirely accurate. While Anakin may have become Sidious' Sith apprentice on Coruscant, it wasn't until after the events of Mustafar where Anakin truly became Vader, and to where it might be more accurate to say that Anakin dueled Obi-Wan instead of Vader. As Legends has described it at numerous points, Vader may have rose on Coruscant, but Anakin died on Mustafar. In this video expose, we'll look at the perspective of both Darth Vader and Darth Sidious within a number of Legends novels to see why these two Sith Lords believed it was more accurate to say Anakin confronted Obi-Wan. And while he might have started down the path of the dark side, Anakin's true evolution into the Sith Lord we all recognize didn't take place until after Mustafar, perhaps even after Episode 3. We'll start with Vader's own thoughts to himself on Mustafar in the novel The Rise and Fall of Darth Vader, in the immediate aftermath of his defeat. Vader recognized he still thought of himself as Anakin, not Vader, as he was climbing up the slope away from the lava river. This sentence alone makes it clear that Anakin's identity still hadn't shifted to the Sith Lord Vader yet. He still accepted the Anakin identity, even though he accepted the dark side too. This same way of thinking by Vader continues within the same novel and within the Revenge of the Sith novelization, with both showing that during the events of Episode 3, Vader didn't really see himself as Darth Vader yet, merely an adherent to the dark side and someone who turned against the Jedi. In The Rise and Fall of Darth Vader, when Anakin is lifted from the surgical table in his cybernetics for the first time and hears the name Lord Vader from Sidious, he's initially confused by the name Vader, having to take time to remember he's now Vader and supposedly Anakin is gone. It wasn't until Anakin was informed that Padme and their child were dead, and that he could sense this himself, that he's finally ready to embrace the dark side and the identity of Darth Vader. In this way, Anakin's drawn-out no is the birth of Vader, the Sith identity and dark path being all that he has left. The same moment of realization for Anakin happens in the Episode 3 novelization, and it's deeper than that scene in The Rise and Fall of Darth Vader. Basically, again, as he's lifted from the surgical table, Anakin comes to the realization that it wasn't some being known as Vader who did everything on Mustafar, but him, Anakin Skywalker. It was Anakin at his true worst, lost in his emotions and consumed by his own selfishness. It's a painful, even torturous realization for Anakin, but again, it was at this moment when whatever was left of Anakin made the decision to fully embrace the dark side and the identity of Vader, as it was all he had left. Therefore, from the point of view of Vader himself in these two novels, it was still Anakin, or at least an individual more Anakin than Vader, who confronted Obi-Wan on Mustafar. In both books, it wasn't until Anakin learned of Padme's death when he definitively accepted the death of Anakin Skywalker and the birth of his Darth Vader identity. The novel Dark Lord: The Rise of Darth Vader expands on Vader's thoughts in this regard only weeks after Episode 3, and it shows Vader only further accepted his interpretation of his journey from Anakin to Vader, concluding he was more Anakin on Mustafar than the being he was in the aftermath of Order 66. Although Vader accepted Anakin was dead, this death was only the result of the events on Mustafar, namely his defeat to Obi-Wan and resulting injuries, and ultimately the death of Padme. In fact, in reflecting on this period that took place only weeks earlier, Vader believed that had everything happened on Mustafar as he planned, with Padme joining him and Obi-Wan being killed, it would have been Anakin sitting on Coruscant's throne, Emperor of the Galaxy. It wouldn't be Vader who overthrew Sidious, but still Anakin. It's one of the novel's great reveals, and does a good job showing Vader hadn't fully rejected his Anakin identity until after the events of Mustafar, with Anakin still being the person who confronted Obi-Wan. Just as was seen in The Rise and Fall of Darth Vader and the Episode 3 novel, from Vader's own perspective, Anakin wasn't destroyed until after his failure on Mustafar and the death of Padme. As Vader would actually think to himself in Dark Lord, while Anakin Skywalker was pushed aside on Coruscant, the death of the Chosen One occurred on Mustafar, which is to say, in Vader's mind, his identity as Anakin and everything that went with it, including his fate as the Chosen One, was only destroyed after Mustafar. The great aspect to the novel Dark Lord is that this is when Sidious began to accept Vader's own interpretation as well, recognizing that when his apprentice was dueling Obi-Wan, he was far less the Sith Lord Darth Vader than even he realized or had foreseen. As Sidious put it, referring to his apprentice at this time, not as Vader, but Anakin, the newest member of the Sith was defeated because he was caught between worlds, not yet devoid of his identity as Anakin Skywalker. Of course, Sidious would realize it after Vader did, but the person who was dueling Obi-Wan was far more Anakin than it first seemed. In fact, Sidious might have unconsciously understood this at the time. As he was traveling to Mustafar to rescue his apprentice, Sidious considered what his options would be if Anakin, not Vader, should die. All of this is to say that at the time Vader was confronted by Obi-Wan, there was much more Anakin that existed than Vader and Sidious realized. As both Sith Lords recognized only weeks later, it was this mistake that played a fundamental role in Anakin's defeat, which ironically would then work to end Vader's connection to the identity of Anakin. My favorite source in regard to this question is without a doubt the novel Death Star, which gives us another great perspective from Vader himself but more than 15 years after the events of Episode 3. Amazingly, Vader's thoughts on who was really dueling Obi-Wan on Mustafar, Anakin or Vader, stays consistent in relation to the previous sources. Vader still held on to the idea that Anakin, and Vader's connections to that identity, was killed on the banks of Mustafar's lava river, with the full acceptance of Vader coming after. But there's a much more important line from Death Star that truly answers the question to our video from the perspective of Vader himself. In traveling to the Death Star, a few years prior to it becoming fully operational, Vader decided it was time to reflect on his memories within his hyperbaric chamber, to feed upon his anger and rage and tap into the power of the dark side. This time, Vader would focus on the memories of his path to becoming what he was physically, namely, someone who relied on cybernetics to live, reverting to thoughts of Obi-Wan and Mustafar. Here, we see Vader think to himself, someday, somehow, Obi-Wan Kenobi would pay for what he had done to Anakin Skywalker, and it would be Darth Vader who collected the toll. This line from Death Star distinctly shows Vader didn't connect his then-present identity as the Sith Lord Darth Vader to the individual defeated by Obi-Wan on Mustafar. That had been Anakin Skywalker, and it was Anakin who Vader would avenge. It wasn't a situation where Vader wanted revenge for what happened to him, a clear distinction showing that despite the fact we see Anakin fall to become Vader on Coruscant prior to Mustafar, Vader always accepted that the more correct way of looking at the duel was it being one between Anakin and Obi-Wan, rather than Vader and Obi-Wan. Whether it be in the immediate aftermath of the duel on Mustafar, on the surgical table on Coruscant, weeks after Order 66, or even years, Vader always believed he was still Anakin when he dueled Obi-Wan in Episode 3, which was ultimately accepted by his master Sidious as well. Without question, based upon these sources and from the perspective of Vader and Sidious, the person who confronted Obi-Wan was far more Anakin than the Sith Lord Vader, who would emerge immediately after. So there we have it, how Vader and Sidious interpreted the Sith Lord's defeat to Obi-Wan. We love making these videos, so why not subscribe for more fun Star Wars theories and discussions. Also, if you enjoyed the video, think about giving a like or leaving a comment. Or perhaps follow us on Twitter, @SW Reading Club, for updates regarding the channel. Or support the channel through Patreon for access to exclusive rewards and discussions. If not for me... for capturing this idea perfectly.